Hi, welcome again to Revero.health success stories. And I'm Brooke, a coach here. And today I'm very happy to introduce Jason, who's going to speak to us about his adventure and in the carnivore diet or in his whole spectrum of eating for nutrition and health. Hi, Jason. How are you?
Wonderful. How are you doing today, bro?
Good. It's so good to be able to visit with you. And thank you once again for taking the time out to share with our listeners what it's been like for you.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, maybe I'll start with what brought you to the carnivore diet or an animal-based diet? What brought you to that?
Well, over the course of the past 10 years, I've actually lost a total of 65 pounds of body fat and kept that off for several years now. And so the carnivore diet is something that I stumbled onto late in 2018 and began to experiment with that. I don't follow a strict carnivore approach. So I guess you could say it's more carnivore adjacent or an animal-based diet. Basically, what I do is a high protein, low carb approach. So when I look back over the history, it has been progressively eliminating carbohydrates, beginning with the worst offenders, which are flour and sugar. And then some of the other junk that has crept into the American diet that sadly has become the foundation of the American diet, like seed oil, industrial seed oils, canola, soy, and things like that. So just getting things cleaned up and getting closer and closer to the bullseye or the target of human nutrition, as I like to phrase it, which is red meat specifically. So late in 2018, I became familiar with Dr. ShawnBaker's work. Filmmaker Chris Bell was the one who really introduced me to the carnivore diet. And I thought, well, okay, so these guys are just thriving on nothing but red meat. Now, like a lot of people up to that point, I was a little skeptical of eating a lot of red meat. I had heard, the information or propaganda, if you want to call it that red meat might not be the healthiest thing. So, alternatives like turkey and things like that were more on the menu, fish, chicken, other sources of protein, but certainly not a lot of red meat, right? So late in 2018, I started really making that more of a mainstay in the diet, up to about a pound a day on a regular basis, and didn't experience any negative health consequences. As a matter of fact, I actually improved my health as a result of that.
Yeah, I
So,
love this concept of the bullseye of nutrition being rudiment meat.
absolutely.
I think that's really key. I love that.
Yeah, we can look at it like the target, like the bullseye in the center of the target, okay? So things that are on the outside circles would be, like I mentioned, they're edible, but they don't do much for human health. Things like sugar and flour, as I mentioned, or refined grains, which unfortunately we have been taught over several decades now that those should be the foundation of the human diet, thanks to those wonderful guidelines, dietary guidelines for Americans, which we know now was very bad information.
Yes.
So as we progressively eliminate those things, we can move into things that may have some benign value or, not necessarily harmful to our health, kind of neutral foods. Those can be things like tubers or root vegetables, things like that. As we move closer and closer in, we're getting to that center of the bullseye, which would be red meat. The rings closest out could be things like eggs and egg yolk, or egg whites and egg yolks, high protein foods, even some dairy if you tolerate it. Those are animal source proteins. Some people can do cottage cheese and fermented foods like yogurt without any problem. So your chicken and fish and protein sources like that would be real close to the bullseye, but the red meat is really that red center, of the target, right? So that's really the most nutrient dense food that we know of. And it's been
absolutely concur. I'm wondering if we should maybe mention to some people who may not know what is so special about ruminant meat as opposed to monogastric animals like pigs or chicken, how red meat is so very special.
Right. Well, I've spent the very past few years in the nutrition industry and done some health coaching myself. I have a degree in education. I taught human biology, anatomy, and physiology in the classroom. So, I'm knowledgeable about these sort of things. And what really makes red meat so special is it's very high in iron. It's high in an absorbable form of iron, which is heme iron. That's important distinction, as well as zinc, aminos, B vitamins, and just basically has everything that we need to maintain human health. Now, certain vitamins that get a little more publicity, I guess you would say, like vitamin C, for example, we're finding out now we don't really need as much of those nutrients if we're not on a real high plant type diet, because a lot of the plant foods contain anti-nutrients that actually rob us of nutrition. So those are attempts to sort of replenish some of what the plant foods are taking out. So by reducing or eliminating the plant foods in the first place, you reduce the amount of those types of nutrients that you need, and you just get to the heart of the matter, which is going to be like your fat soluble vitamins, the ones I mentioned before.
Yeah.
And A, D, E, and K, those are your fat soluble vitamins. Those are all found in animal source protein foods.
Yeah, all those amino acids that that the rumen produces, even from just cellulose. I mean, I think the special quality of the rumen, the magic of the rumen.
It is a magnificent system. The fact that we're not able to extract nutrients from grass, but ruminant animals can do that by virtue of the fact that they have multiple stomachs. They're able to clean all of the things out that would harm our health, and reduce it down to a usable form of nutrition for us by bioaccumulation, biomagnification. And then we can extract the nutrients from the animal because, we're animals. So it takes animal food. It takes animals to create animals, right? To, sustain animal life.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not rocket science,
Okay, so let's get back to like your personal story of like when you started to appreciate ruminant meat more and more and started to use that as a focal point of your diet. What are some of the changes that you recognized for yourself?
Well, I went through the spectrum, like I guess a lot of people probably did. I started off with a more moderate approach, which was maybe a little higher in carbohydrate, but just trying to keep it with cleaner choices like starches, tubers, potatoes, things like that, maybe some rice here and there. And I progressed into like a paleo style diet, which is eliminating grains and legumes, which is the case with a lot of plant foods, contain those anti-nutrients like phytates and lectins and things like that are not good for our health. So progressing from a paleo diet to more of a ketogenic type approach. I was always in favor of a little higher protein, but the general consensus of the keto diet is you need to be really high on fat and just keep that protein kind of moderate. Yeah. So I think I went through the same issue that a lot of people went through. I had already lost about 65 pounds, like I said, up to that point. And when I first heard about the keto diet, I just jumped in headlong, fasting 20-something hours a day, doing the kind of bulletproof fast, butter and cream type stuff, like a lot of people did. Get the fat up really high and just keep the carbs down low. And my meal frequency was so low, my protein was so low, and I was still weight training on a regular basis and doing some pretty intense cardiovascular type activity on a daily basis. So it crashed my metabolism. And when I finally came back to eating maybe a little more normal type diet, incorporating some starches and things like that, for the first time ever, I rebounded with weight gain of about 15 or 20 pounds. And that had never happened to me. I had lost a lot of weight and sustained that for about 3 years. So I rebounded from the keto diet, my little experiment with the keto diet. I was a little disoriented by that experience. And then that's when I started hearing about this carnivore approach and how higher protein, getting back to what I intuitively knew to be the right way to eat was a little higher protein diet than what I had been doing. So I used that to just stimulate the metabolic rate, rebuild muscle tissue, and get back up to a higher caloric intake, and basically used a carnivore adjacent or animal-based type process to rebuild health. right? After having a rebound of weight gain. And that has really allowed me over the past 3 years, like I said, to maintain a good state of health, to be able to eat a little more often when I want to, but to remain fat adapted. So on days I choose to fast or need to fast for whatever reason, I can do that too. So it's really the best of both worlds.
So let's ask, what are you eating on a typical day now?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I like I said, a high protein, low carbohydrate approach, and I do like nutrition by the numbers. So since I'm a health coach and personal trainer, when I'm working with a client, I will normally start them with a protein target, because a lot of people have never heard of that before. They think calories is all that matters and it's just nutrition by the numbers, and they just all add up, and it's kind of like a math equation, like calories in, calories out. The reality is it's energy in, energy out when it comes to weight loss.
Yeah.
And I feel like, in the way that a lot of people are starting to come around to this fact, protein should be in a little category all by itself, because it's not really metabolized as energy the way fat and carbohydrate are.
Yeah.
So, like I said, nutrition by the numbers. I go for about 240 grams of protein per day. This protein to energy concept has been popularized by Dr. Ted Naiman. I'm sure a lot of your listeners will be very familiar with him. He's been a guest on Revero several times and interviewed.
I love Ted's work. It's great.
I do as well. And that has been a real game changer for me. So the PE diet, or the protein to energy ratio concept, phenomenal. I try to keep about a 2-to-1 protein to energy ratio. So 240 grams of protein, and I'm looking for 120 total grams of energy per day. And energy, by the way, is going to be carbohydrate and fat combined. Yep. So
either or all. Yes.
Right. So I'm going for a mixture of eggs and egg yolks. I'll normally do a couple of whole eggs with a 1/4 cup of liquid egg whites. I like that product just for convenience. Get the protein up without all that additional fat. Maybe some cottage cheese around 10 o'clock in the morning. Lunch, I normally have around 2 o'clock. I like salmon. Salmon is a real staple food there for that meal. And then dinner around 6 p.m. That's usually some lean ground beef or steak or something along those lines. And I do have a couple of shakes and protein bars, sometimes at the end of the day, sometimes as a pre-training snack, just to get a little something in the tank. And that's pretty much it. That's the staple of the diet. Some yogurt, Greek yogurt is also another staple. So.
Are you eating a potato with that steak? Did I hear you mention?
No, I don't normally do that. I have dabbled with a carb backloading type approach, but normally for that, I'll wait till the very end of the day and maybe just do like a couple of packets of oatmeal mixed in with some Greek yogurt and whey protein, kind of a little healthy dessert thing, just a little carbohydrate at the very end of the day, just to refill after a weight training session.
So you are lifting weights, and do you also do running, or what are some of the other?
Normally I train twice a day. You've heard this analogy about, making exercise a daily habit like brushing your teeth, right? Well, I don't know anyone who does or would admit that they only brush their teeth once a day. We pretty much brush your teeth at least twice a day, right? So exercise twice a day. Cardiovascular type exercise in the morning. I like to do that in a semi-fasted state just to prioritize fat burning for energy. May have a little coffee with maybe a little whey protein mixed in just for flavor. And then off to the gym to do about 30 minutes of that high intensity interval training or steady state type cardio on a little bit of an incline. I also enjoy just being outdoors and taking multiple walks throughout the day just to try to get a little extra activity along with the sun exposure. It's just great for your overall health, including your mental health, just to be outdoors to get some fresh air and sunshine. And then weight training in the evening for about 30 to 45 minutes. And I do that 6 days a week.
Sounds awesome. Before you took this journey, were there some health issues that you were concerned with?
Absolutely. My real wake-up call came late in 2009. I had been through a stressful time in my life. I went through a divorce a few years prior to that. I was a single father for 3 years with 3 little girls that I was trying to raise on my own. So that's a tough spot for a single dad. Somehow I managed to get through that, but I wasn't really able to prioritize my health the way that I wanted to. I had been in pretty good shape in my early 20s. That kind of deteriorated during that time. Shortly thereafter, I remarried, so I was able to, start thinking about getting back in the gym and being a little more on track with the nutrition and so forth. But my real wake-up call came with a bad report from the doctor's office. I stepped on the scale. I weighed 254 pounds, and I had high blood pressure, elevated blood sugar. So all those markers of poor metabolic health, or metabolic syndrome as we know it. And I just decided right then and there, I am not going to have high blood pressure. I'm just not going to do that. I knew that the alternative was being faced with a lifetime of prescription medication, which I'm very passionately against. And that's a topic that we can get into a little more detail about if you would like to. And so the doctor's office didn't really have a set plan or a method for me to use. They suggested I could lose some weight to reduce my blood pressure, but they didn't really have the tools to make that happen. The mainstream type of advice you're going to get from your doctor is something like the eat less, move more kind of stuff that we know just really doesn't work in the real world. So I synthesized what I knew and just discovered a few things along the way that worked for me, which is what I now share with my clients, my audience, and was actually the subject of my first book, Live Like an Athlete, which is available on Amazon, by the way.
And thank you for adding that. I would love to see your book. Yes.
I would love to send you a copy of it, Brooke, and I'll do that. That has all my best tips and techniques that I use to lose the weight. Of course, I've continued to refine my approach, like I said, since that book was published. So I've got a new book coming out, and that one is going to be called Eat Meat, Not Wheat. And I will be excited. Yes, I know your audience will love to hear about that. It's all about how those dietary guidelines for Americans got us so upside down, because that bad information was to eat wheat and grains and to minimize the healthy foods like red meat and eggs on the basis of low fat is the healthy thing, right? So by taking that bad advice, we actually removed the healthiest foods from the diet and prioritized the things that are the worst for our health. So that's how we got in this mess to begin with. So the way out of it is to just do the exact opposite, to eat meat, not wheat, instead of the other way around. What
do you think now of the very, very potent, strong agenda of removing meat from Americans' diet, American diet worldwide, which is really frightening to see it less and less and less, and praise to have non-meat days. I mean, I always say, there's a special place in hell reserved for the people who would take the most nutritious food on the planet away from children.
I agree. I follow Dr. Baker on social media, and I know that he's very passionate about sharing that information with the world. Hey, look, here's what's going on. Here's what the powers that be are trying to do. Are you going to just stand back passively and allow this to happen? I feel like there is a social, political, economic agenda behind all of it. And, plant-based is the newest version of the grain-based diet. Okay. It's just a new spin on an old thing. Okay. This has been going on for decades now. And everyone, or not everyone, but a lot of people want to be plant-based these days. It's part of what's known as the health halo effect. So food manufacturers love to slap a little label on a packaged food to try to make it seem healthy in the minds of the consumer. So gluten-free, for example. Okay, very few people actually have celiac disease or gluten intolerance, but the majority of people feel like gluten-free means there's something healthy about it, right? Same thing with plant-based. If they've got a plant-based logo stamped on there, it gets the little health halo effect. But guess what else is plant-based? The worst 3 offenders: sugar, flour, and vegetable oils or industrial seed oils, all made from plants.
Absolutely.
So all processed food is basically plant-based.
Yeah.
And so you can do maybe a healthier plant-based type of approach if you're very diligent about it. But I think the average person, is probably just too much trouble, and it's probably not economically feasible. And why on earth would you want to do that when it's just so much easier to just eat animal source protein than to try to combine aminos from different foods that are going to be impractical and have so much complication tied into it. It's done. I feel like this agenda is for political reasons, because we know that some major league wealthy people have a vested interest in this vegan, vegetarian, plant-based approach. I'm not going to name names, but we kind of know who these people are. There was a publicity film or propaganda type film that was released last year. I didn't watch The Game Changers, but I heard all about it.
Yeah, I think that was the one with Arnold talking about eating plants.
Yeah. No, I didn't see it, so I don't know anything that was really said in the film. But I know that the director or the people who funded that have a vested interest in all of these processed foods, pea protein and so on and so forth. So.
Yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And we could see, and instead of seeing green slopes out here in ranch land of cattle grazing, you'd be able to see greenhouses and greenhouses growing protein.
Well, my grandfather had a farm, and I grew up in that environment. He had several hundred acres of farmland with cattle. So, I grew up around cows out grazing in the pasture, and have eaten farm fresh meat and so forth. And I've just seen the entire life cycle of the animal. I mean, how they're raised and sold to market and even slaughtered and so forth. I feel like a lot of people now are so disconnected from the food supply. Like when I taught biology in the classroom, I had some interaction with some younger students, and I tried to explain to them how food is produced. If you're going to eat plants, you're going to put seeds in the ground. If you're going to eat animals, animals are going to eat the plants, and we're going to slaughter the animal and eat the meat from it, or gather eggs or catch a fish or whatever. That's where food comes from. And they just said, oh no, food comes from the grocery store. They have no clue of where food actually comes from.
Yeah, once I talked to a butcher at the local regular grocery store years ago when I was first starting Carnivore, and I was talking about meat, and he said, meat here, he's the butcher, and he goes, it's a lost leader at the grocery store. We really don't even really make money off the meat here. We don't lose money, but we don't make money. We make money in all those aisles in between with all those processed foods, and that's really what we're talking about.
That is 100% accurate. I actually worked for a large grocery chain for a little while. I was head of a natural foods department for a major grocery chain. And what you said is 100% accurate. They lose money on the perishable items, which are meat and eggs and dairy. They have pretty limited shelf life. And they make money on the things that last forever. So in my first book, Live Like an Athlete, I coined this term for these foods, these man-made kind of food-like items. I call them carbohydrates with a G. Actually, garbage posing as food, and those are created with an agenda in mind.
Yeah.
The food companies employ food scientists who work around the clock to get just the right amount of sugar and salt to reach what they call the bliss point, so that those foods elicit an addictive response, and that people will just consume them over and over and over, and they can't get enough of them because they don't contain any nutrients in the first place. Also, they last forever on the shelf. So, like you said, the grocery store can make their money off of cereal and chips and cookies and crackers and all that other carbohydrate food items, and they lose money on the real food. So you've always heard the advice to shop the perimeter of the grocery store. Exactly. And if you think about what's out there, the meat, the seafood, the eggs, the dairy, and the produce, it's all on the outside. And then those center aisles is just no man's land, canned foods, box, anything in a bag, box, or a bottle, basically, is just not even real food, and you shouldn't go anywhere near it. So,
and it's really almost the same three ingredients, seed oil, grain, and sugar, just sort of mixed around in different shapes and sizes and flavorings, but it's kind of the same three things.
Yeah, it is, and they can make just about anything out of it. And that leads me to another key point, and this is part of the eat meat not wheat methodology or thought process. The dietary guidelines for Americans was put out by the USDA. That's the United States Department of Agriculture. That has nothing to do with human health. It's not the Food and Drug Administration. It's not the Health and Human Service or anything like that. Department of Agriculture is to promote agriculture in America, which, if you look at human history, agriculture is really where it all went wrong. Okay, our ancestors were thriving on a mostly animal-based type diet because there simply was nothing else available. Just go back just a few generations. We didn't have grocery store in every corner. We didn't have even produce like fruit year round. It was seasonal. It was small amounts. And what else is there to eat? Fish, meat, eggs, those sort of things, right? So that's really the human diet. And agriculture is where it all went wrong. So now we've got the Department of Agriculture promoting, like you said, those big monocrops. They are wheat and corn and soy and things that really, they're the way they're grown, the farming methods that they're using are harmful to the environment when compared to grazing ruminant animals.
Yeah.
We could go on with, the ills surrounding that, but the worst manifestation of it is going to be something like a bag of Doritos, right? It's brightly colored so that it fools the human eye. It looks like something nutrient rich because we're sort of, programmed to think that over decades of thinking, oh, that ripe red apple has something in it that's good for my health, right? So we got some bright colors going on. We got some off the chart flavors that, just get you addicted to it. And you'll never reach satiety by eating those type of foods because they don't have any nutrition, but they're made with that agenda in mind, just to sell, with really not much consideration for the harm that it's doing to people.
Yeah. And I think, and I have to just speak out, I think the worst offender in that and other processed foods really is the seed oil, which I think is being understood more and more as
we're finding
main offender.
Yeah, we're finding out now that's maybe even worse than sugar.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Well, so with your clients, I bet you have a lot of clients with not only fitness level but weight loss and maybe some really intractable diseases that they have to overcome themselves through diet.
Yes, type 2 diabetes, I would say, is probably the main one, and I'm getting more and more of those type of clients. And it's sad, but it's, in some respects, it's good when I can see the light goes off in someone's mind when they're starting to make the connections.
Yeah.
And I explain to them, or I'll just ask someone, what do you normally eat for breakfast? Their answer is usually something like juice, toast, cereal, maybe, if they'll admit it, pastry, waffle, breakfast items, right? Things that we have been taught or conditioned to think represent a good breakfast. Or they'll just say oatmeal, if they want to sound healthier. That's maybe they're trying.
What did you call that? You called it the halo.
Oh, the halo effect. Yeah.
Halo.
If they're being honest or they really are trying to be healthy, a lot of times they'll say, oh, I have oatmeal for breakfast.
Right.
And, I'll just tell them, stop, don't do that. That's the first thing to just stop, because I've had several clients I've been able to reverse type 2 diabetes just within a matter of weeks, just by taking that carbohydrate load out of the equation first thing in the morning. Okay, well, they'll say something like, oh, I thought oatmeal was healthy.
Right.
Well, you were meant to think that.
Right.
So basically everything that you believe up to this point is a lie, and you gotta be able to relearn, right, what real nutrition is all about. Let's take a step back and just have some eggs for breakfast,
Or steak.
Right. A couple strips of bacon or some steak or even, a burger patty or whatever. We're not that far removed from a time when people were a little more in tune with those sort of concepts and not so, I guess, inundated with advertising the way we are now. So thanks to the increase in media, we've got, not only television and radio that have been around for a long time, but now we're bombarded with social media. Everyone has a handheld device that they're just on all the time, absorbing all this conditioning. Another authority that I learned a lot from in this respect is a bodybuilder named Rick Drayson, who recently passed away. He was part of the golden era of bodybuilders, if you will, training partner of Arnold Schwarzenegger. He put out a lot of great information on YouTube about the type of diet they followed back in the 60s and 70s. Hamburger patty, omelet,
Beef and eggs. Beef and
cottage
eggs.
cheese, some tuna, some chicken, basically just eating a high protein, low carbohydrate diet, and then they might go off the rails and have a cheat day or junk day, as they called it, on Sunday, just eat, pie or ice cream or whatever you want to do, get it out of your system, and then get back on the diet again. Well, that's just 50, 60 years ago, right? People were doing that. The Atkins diet, that worked great. That's prioritizing animal source protein and getting the worst things out of the diet, like the sugar and the flour. So you don't have to, I guess what I would want to impart to someone, you don't feel like you have to be 100% all or nothing, because you can get great results by progressively reducing or eliminating.
Just eliminating seed oil alone makes a huge difference. I wanted to reiterate a point that you mentioned. I think most people don't realize that it was just a few generations ago that there were no grocery stores. Right. And there would maybe be a little corner market that people maybe brought in their produce, because after the war, where there was the Victory Garden, people started to grow more and more produce and would bring it into those little stores. And then you'd have the ranchers and people who were taking care of dairy farms and stuff. So I think it's really easy to forget that actually we sourced our own food without this big grocery store. And it was really just a few generations ago. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I really like that you made that point. I want to just ask you, so if you, in someone who is just starting to look at their diet, starting to view their diet now through the eyes of nutrition instead of just taste, and maybe even contemplating, whether they should embark on an animal-based diet, what would you tell them how to get started?
Well, I will always start with what to do instead of what not to do. I mean, honestly, it's more about what you don't eat than what you do. But if you give somebody a long list of none of this and none of that and none of the other thing, and we're going to take this away, and we're going to restrict that, and we're going to, that's not going to sound very appealing. So I would start off with something like, well, do you like this? Do you like that? Do you like, what are the types of protein foods that you like? Well, like I said, a lot of people are going to be gun shy about red meat and eggs because we've just been told that stuff's bad, right? Even though it's the best thing for our health. So, somebody could, I guess, sort of dip their toes in a little more animal-based by doing things like chicken or fish, which have that kind of health halo effect. People feel like, maybe white meat is healthier for whatever reason. Just turn it into grams of protein. Like let's just get the protein up to 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight per day, or your target body weight. So for somebody who's weighing 200 pounds, 200 grams of protein. If a female has a goal of reaching 130 or 140, that's 130, 140 grams of protein per day, right? And let's just start there, because by doing that, the appetite will auto-regulate. Those other things won't seem so appealing. And, I don't know how many people are listening have ever sat down and tried to eat an entire pound of ground beef in one sitting. It's a real challenge.
Yeah.
It's a real challenge.
Although a steak is a little bit easier.
Or a steak, yeah, but it's just so filling.
Yes.
that it's difficult even for, someone, I'm close to 200 pounds and, weight training and doing all this stuff. Sometimes it's like I can't quite get that last bite, Now, I will admit, I have eaten an entire large pizza by myself before, and that's pretty easy. You can just get that whole thing down because there's nothing there that's really telling you, oh, you're full, stop eating, right? But yeah, try to eat a huge steak or a pound of ground beef by yourself sometime and just see if, first of all, if you can even do it, and then see how hungry you are for some ice cream or cookies or something afterwards. You won't be,
Yeah, you're really satisfied. Hit the satisfaction button for sure.
Well, and a previous generation or two, people really knew that meat was the center of the diet. I mean, look at a Norman Rockwell painting from the whatever era that was, maybe the 50s. You got a big turkey or big pot roast or something right there in the middle of the table, right? And the rest of it is just kind of ancillary to that. So now we're being told, oh, just keep that in a real small amount. And you don't want to overdo it. And what you're really going to fill up on, I guess, is what, leaves or something? I mean, how desperately hungry would your great grandparents have been to walk by and grab a handful of leaves or some seed head off of some wheat stalk, to avoid starving to death? I mean, that's like the last resort, the last thing we would ever eat, right? And just
even the animals know that. Even with farm animals, that protein is key, and that animal flesh is key.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, vegetarian or not, they go for that.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we just want to. I always tell people, start where you are, but don't stay there. You can always progress, in a direction, right? Set a goal, but don't feel like you have to just conquer the mountain on day one. Like it is a process. So let's start off with that 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight per day. That needs to be animal source protein. I say red meat and eggs, but like I said, you can do whatever, chicken, fish, turkey, dairy or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, some plant protein is okay, but people need to know that it's an inferior quality. It's going to come with anti-nutrients. It's going to come with probably stomach distress for a lot of digestive distress. For a lot of people.
And it's going to come with PUFA.
Yeah, that too.
Saturated fatty acids.
That too. Right?
Yeah, I think that's great. Start where you are and move forward. And it's a very delicious project, as you know.
Absolutely. Tastes great, Like who doesn't love a big omelet with some shredded mozzarella or whatever, cheeseburgers. I mean, what do you like? What's not to love about that?
Yeah.
Right. What's not to love about it?
Well, thank you so much. I think that it's a great message to keep the protein high, how important it is, protein as a goal.
Wonderful.
And then fill in the other spots. It's great.
Well, thank you so much for having me on the show today. I really do appreciate it. And I will get a copy of my book out to you.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. And are you on Instagram?
Yes. It's strong_for life. So strong for life. Yeah, strong for life. I had to put a little underscore in there. Somebody snagged strong for life. They're not using it. It's just, it's not available. So if you're out there and you're listening and you have @strong for life, I want it. Give it up.
Okay. Well, thanks again, Jason. And I'll follow you on Instagram. We'll be fast friends.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Yeah. And you, Carney, on continuing to help people.
Right.
Thank you.
Join Revero.health for a 30-day free trial to get access to live Q&A with VIP guests, social community meetings, member discounts, low-carb healthcare providers list, forum, workouts, monthly challenges, early access to podcasts, recipes, carnivore diet guide, fasting guide, shred guide, and much more.